Chosen 1. Listen closely. February 3rd, 2026 isn't a random day after a full moon. It's the moment after the snow full moon peaks, when the emotional surge stops building and the spiritual results start showing up. And here's how you'll know this is for you. If you've felt weirdly calm lately, not checked out, not numb, just calm. If your mind got quiet instead of loud. If something deep in you has been whispering, "I'm done chasing, I'm done proving, I'm done explaining." That's not an accident, because God doesn't always shift your life through chaos. Sometimes He shifts everything through stillness, the kind that makes you realize you've been fighting to keep things alive that He already told you to release. So stay until the end, because once you understand what locks in on February 3rd, you'll see why you can't go back to the old version of you, even if you tried. Quick pause. If this is hitting you already, like, subscribe, and comment. I feel the shift. I want to know who's walking through this with God, not just watching. Now, here's what most people don't understand. 1. Why the day after the full moon matters more than the full moon itself. Most people think spiritual change should look dramatic, breakdowns, big signs, emotional explosions. But the full moon is usually the peak of pressure. It exposes what's unstable. It drags patterns to the surface. But February 3rd isn't about intensity. It's about clarity. Because when the emotional charge drains out, only truth remains. You might notice you're not replaying conversations, bracing for reactions, trying to fix what's been draining you. That's not exhaustion. That's your spirit coming out of survival mode. For a long time, you've been asking, what do I do? How do I make this work? How do I keep the peace? But on February 3rd, something changes. You stop asking, and a quiet knowing takes its place. I see it. I'm done. God, I trust you. That's one of the clearest signs the shift is real, because real spiritual growth doesn't make you more emotional. It makes you harder to manipulate. What used to trigger you starts to feel distant. People reveal intentions without you confronting them. Messages come in, but they don't control you. And the biggest sign, you don't feel pressure to respond immediately. That's not coldness. That's peace. And peace isn't passive. It's proof your soul isn't being dragged by the same cycle anymore. Here's what's happening spiritually. After the full moon peak, the energy doesn't disappear. It turns inward. And when it turns inward, it rearranges you. It recalibrates your nervous system. It detaches you from what you were emotionally addicted to. It sharpens discernment without anxiety. That's why God's voice can feel quieter now, not weaker, cleaner. Because when resistance leaves, He doesn't have to shout. 2. The invisible shift. When your soul stops asking permission. February 3rd won't come with fireworks. It shows up in the absence of what used to control you, the absence of internal debate, hesitation, the urge to over-explain your boundaries. Before, even when you knew the truth, you still bargained with it. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should give one more chance. Maybe it'll change. That wasn't weakness. That was an old survival pattern. But then something snaps into place. The negotiation ends. Not because life gets easy, but because your spirit stops needing outside confirmation to obey what God already told you. And this part is important. You might not feel excited. You might not feel scared. You might feel uncomfortable because you realize you don't need to be understood anymore. You stop rehearsing conversations. You stop softening the truth ahead of time. You stop managing people's emotions. Not because you're trying to be distant, but because you're finally being honest. And that clarity will confuse people who benefited from your uncertainty. They expect access. They expect explanations. They expect negotiation. But after February 3rd, your boundary becomes energetic. You don't have to announce it. Your presence communicates it. Some people will respect you without knowing why. Others will drift without a final conversation. Some will expose hidden motives without you asking. Not because you became harsh, but because you stopped carrying the relationship by yourself. And that's when you start seeing things resolve without your effort. Situations end without you forcing closure. Doors close quietly, and God removes what you kept trying to manage. That's not coincidence. God responds faster to clarity than to desperation. And February 3rd is when clarity becomes permanent. One more shift happens, deeply personal. Your relationship with guilt changes. Before, self-respect felt heavy. Saying no felt dangerous. Walking away triggered shame. But after this, guilt loses its grip. Not because you stop caring, but because your nervous system stops linking self-respect to danger. Your body learns a new truth. Safety does not require submission. Some people will misread your calm. They'll call it cold. They'll say you changed. But what really happened is, you stopped shrinking to fit into roles God never assigned you. February 3rd doesn't make you louder. It makes you unreachable to distortion. And when distortion loses access to you, it collapses. Because once your soul stops asking permission, anything that required your hesitation can't stay. 3. Why the chosen feel peace while others feel confused. There's a moment after powerful lunar cycles most people miss. It's not dramatic, yet it's decisive. After intense lunar energy, things quietly split into two states. Not by belief, not by effort, but by capacity. One stabilizes, the other destabilizes, and it becomes obvious on February 3rd, right after the snow full moon peak. So if February 3rd brought you calm instead of chaos, that's not random. That's a sign. Most people wake up restless, mentally loud, pressured to act and fix something now. They confuse urgency with intuition, reaction with truth. But the chosen experience something different. Stillness. Not shut down. Stillness with awareness. You can watch situations without controlling them. Witness emotions in others without absorbing them. Feel what's happening without being dragged into it. That's not apathy. That's mastery. Because you didn't resist what surfaced. You didn't dramatize it. You let it move through you. Others are still fighting it, suppressing, reframing, outrunning. Their nervous systems stay activated. Yours doesn't. And that's how a cycle ends. Not with a speech, with non-engagement. When a pattern stops triggering you, stops pulling fear, stops demanding defense, it loses authority. Old problems feel irrelevant. People who once had power feel neutral. Situations that once defined you don't require your intervention. Neutrality isn't indifference. It's freedom. God doesn't reward intensity. He responds to integration when the lesson becomes part of your structure. That's why you don't feel the urge to force anything on February 3rd. Because when something truly integrates, it doesn't demand action. It changes your presence. People may misunderstand your stillness, but what they're sensing is completion. And completion exposes instability. So others may act strangely, projecting, provoking, rushing. And you can observe it without being pulled in. Not because you're superior, but because your system already finished the lesson. February 3rd confirms something powerful. You didn't just feel the snow full moon. You absorbed it, and what's absorbed can't be undone. Peace is proof the work is complete. From here on, your path won't be shaped by reaction. It'll be shaped by resonance. 4. the silent reprogramming of your identity. February 3rd doesn't come with announcements, no sign, no fireworks. It works quietly. This is the day your identity begins to reprogram, not through effort, through subtraction. You don't become someone new overnight. You stop carrying versions of yourself built for survival and approval, and the absence can feel strange at first. Many chosen notice. Motivation feels different, not weaker, different. The drive to prove yourself starts dissolving. Goals lose their emotional charge. Achievements feel optional. That can be confusing, because we were trained to believe striving equals purpose. But this is refinement. Your identity is being freed from performance. You stop needing to convince people, win arguments, defend your choices, be understood. Not because you don't care, but because your sense of self is no longer outsourced. February 3rd is when identity detaches from reaction. Before, who you were was shaped by responses. After this, it becomes internal. Certain spaces start feeling energetically loud, even if they look impressive. This isn't isolation, it's discernment. You start craving clean energy, conversations that don't require translation, connections that don't demand explanation. And then it hits you. You don't need many people. You need aligned people. That's why your circle may shrink. Not through drama, through distance. You stop over-functioning to keep the peace. You stop performing relevance. What remains feels lighter, truer. Your identity stops being built on how hard you try and starts being built on how clearly you live. And clarity attracts without force. Some people feel drawn, some drift. Not because you became cold, because your energy stopped compensating. Your system stabilized, and when it stabilizes, anything incompatible falls away. That's why February 3rd feels anticlimactic to some and life-altering to others. No dramatic rebirth, just a quiet realization. I don't need to become more to be whole. And that rewrites everything. Decisions sharpen. Tolerance for distortion drops. Worth stops being tied to effort. This isn't reinvention, it's calibration. Your inner signal is strong enough now. Life responds differently, not because you asked louder, but because you're finally communicating with clarity. 5. How life begins to respond differently after February 3rd. After February 3rd, effort starts behaving differently. Not because effort stops working, but because it's no longer the main currency. You may notice this first. Pushing gets weaker results. Forcing feels heavy. Trying harder creates resistance. And yet, things still happen. That's the paradox. Because what changes isn't what happens. It's how it happens. Before this, progress required pressure, action, persistence, proof. Afterward, progress requires alignment. Situations resolve without follow-ups. People reach out without being prompted. Information arrives without being chased. Not instantly, naturally. Some call it manifestation, luck, perfect timing, but it's neither. It's permission. Permission opens when your internal state matches what you're asking to receive. Before, your desire may have been real, but your nervous system was still bracing for loss, still transmitting urgency. Life doesn't respond to words. God responds to signal stability. And February 3rd is when that stability locks in. Your system stops broadcasting need, stops searching for reassurance, and when urgency disappears, life can move freely. That's why opportunities after this don't arrive as loud announcements. They arrive as a conversation that quietly shifts, a delay that turns into protection, a door closing. Without panic, only relief. And relief matters, because relief is a sign of readiness. Another sign, answers arrive differently. Before, you searched constantly, waiting for certainty. After, answers show up without effort. You overhear a sentence, read a line, someone says exactly what you needed, without knowing why. That's resonance. This is why doing more after the shift can feel counterproductive. The old strategy was, act first, trust later. The new strategy is, trust first, act when prompted. Timing becomes precise. Move too early and things stall. Wait, and alignment forms. Move intuitively, and momentum accelerates. Challenges don't disappear. They stop obstructing you. They become navigation, not punishment. And the biggest change of all, you stop asking, why isn't this working yet? Because you can feel it. Things are already reorganizing. February 3rd is when resistance ends. And when resistance ends, life stops pushing back. It responds quietly, efficiently, almost ordinary, until you realize how different everything feels. 6. The emotional neutrality that confirms your awakening is real. There's one sign that matters more than visions, signs, or synchronicities. It doesn't look spiritual. It won't impress anyone. You feel neutral toward what once controlled you. Not numb, not disconnected, not indifferent, neutral. And neutrality is misunderstood. Because this world equates emotion with meaning, reaction with truth, intensity with authenticity. But emotional neutrality isn't the absence of feeling. It's the absence of compulsion. The compulsion to react, to defend, to relive the past, to rush the future. On February 3rd, many chosen realize old triggers don't activate the same. What used to feel dangerous now feels informational. Memories feel lighter. Uncertainty feels manageable. This isn't suppression. Suppression takes effort. Neutrality takes none. Your emotions are still present. They just don't sit in the driver's seat. That's sovereignty. Before, decisions were shaped by fear of loss, anticipation of reactions, the need to feel safe. After this shift, those influences loosen, because your nervous system stops confusing emotion with danger. Now emotion becomes data. You can observe it and choose your response, or choose no response at all. That's why neutrality feels unfamiliar. It removes urgency, it removes drama, and without urgency, old patterns collapse. The past stops demanding resolution. The future stops feeling like something you have to chase. It feels open, and that unsettles people who were used to your reactivity. They may try to provoke emotion, restart old dynamics, project intensity onto your calm, but your system doesn't react. Not because you're distant, because you're centered. Neutrality doesn't block connection, it filters it. Only what resonates can pass. That's why relationships shift. That's why certain people lose emotional power over you. You didn't withdraw, you stabilized. Awakening doesn't make you more sensitive, it makes you less reactive. Not feeling everything, not being ruled by what you feel. And when neutrality arrives, you'll recognize it for what it is, not an ending. Relief. For the first time, you're not being pulled in opposite directions. Your energy is centered. Your choices are clean. This is sovereignty. And February 3rd is when that memory returns. 7. What quiet souls attract next, and why this season lasts after the snowful moon peak on February 1st, something subtle shifts in how life meets you, especially by February 3rd. It's not that life becomes perfect, it becomes less dramatic, and for many chosen people, that's the strangest change of all. You'll notice people approach you differently, not with intensity, not with demands, but with caution, curiosity, even respect. Some speak more carefully around you, others open up without knowing why, and some keep their distance, not rejection, awareness. Because your energy doesn't attract chaos the way it used to. Quiet souls don't attract noise. They attract clarity. That's why situations start resolving without confrontation. Conflicts dissolve before they escalate. Misunderstandings untangle without long explanations. Not because you became passive, because your presence stopped feeding friction. Drama needs reaction. It needs triggers, urgency, emotional fuel, and your system no longer supplies it. So life adjusts. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your pace. You stop over-communicating intentions. Things simply happen. And that isn't luck. It's structure. Most growth phases rise and fall with mood and motivation. But what begins after this shift lasts because it isn't built on emotion. It's built on architecture. Before, your inner structure was built around bracing, anticipating, defending, self-correcting. Every choice passed through emotional checkpoints. Now those checkpoints are gone. Your system reorganized for efficiency, not survival. That's why things feel easier without life being easy. Silence doesn't feel empty anymore. External stimulation becomes optional. And yes, this can feel lonely at first. Not isolated, just free from distraction. And the irony is, that's usually when real connection arrives. Not from people who want access, from people who recognize resonance. Those connections don't rush you. They don't drain you. They meet you where you are. That's why this season holds. It doesn't depend on motivation. It doesn't collapse under pressure. Your system auto-corrects back to regulation. So challenges don't knock you off center. Opportunities don't overwhelm you. Delays don't trigger fear. Everything gets filtered through stability, and stability is magnetic. God doesn't honor noise. He honors coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions stop contradicting each other, your energy concentrates, and concentrated energy attracts results with less strain. That's what quiet souls attract next. Simplicity that holds, results that last, connections that don't require explanations. Because this isn't a phase, it's a foundation. 8. Why this activation doesn't repeat the same way. This is often misunderstood because it doesn't behave like a spiritual event. It doesn't restart. It doesn't recycle with bigger fireworks. Because it isn't a cycle. It's a crossing. Cycles revisit lessons. Crossings take you beyond them. What locks in after February 3rd isn't something you pass through. It's a threshold you step over. And once your soul stabilizes at that level, life stops presenting the same challenges. Because repetition only happens where instability still has access. Before this, life taught through repetition. Same pattern, different face, same pressure, different situation. Not punishment, instruction. But instruction ends when integration is complete. That's why this shift feels quiet. Decisive moments rarely feel dramatic. They feel final. Old timelines close without confrontation. Not through closure talks. They close because they can't reach you anymore. Timelines are sustained by attention, emotion, and identity. And when identity changes, the timeline loses its anchor. You may notice something strange. Certain futures you once feared don't feel unlikely. They feel impossible. Not because circumstances changed, because you did. Your nervous system no longer supports that outcome. That's how timelines end. Incompatibility. At the same time, new paths stabilize. Not as plot twists, but as quiet continuity. You may already be walking them. Your decisions feel simpler. Your direction feels clearer. You're not testing options anymore. You're selecting resonance. And here's the hidden shift. Your soul stops rehearsing survival. Most people brace subconsciously, anticipating loss, resistance, misunderstanding, disappointment. Even in success, that rehearsal drains you. After this point, the rehearsal stops. Not because danger disappears, because your system stops expecting danger as the default. Your body learns stability isn't temporary, so life stops pushing. Challenges may still arise, but they don't destabilize you. Change may still happen, but it doesn't threaten your identity. You're no longer being shaped through crisis. You're being supported through alignment. And if this season feels quieter than you expected, that's the sign. God doesn't shout when He trusts you. He becomes still. Silence means no more chasing, no more proving. From here forward, life responds to your state, not your struggle. Protect this season. Don't rush it. Don't over-explain it. Because after February 3rd, 2026, life isn't responding to what you want. It's responding to who you've become.